Okay, very excited today to have Billy Restey. He's a name that I think that everybody watching this will probably already know. Has done a lot on Bitcoin, a lot in Ordinals, has been around in the NFT scene pre-Ordinals as well, which I'm sure we're going to talk about and talk about growth and I guess mindset change and just the difference now that he's working on Bitcoin, particularly with all the adventures that that he's been on, that you've been on, Billy. So enough from me. I could tell your story for you. I've been following it obviously closely myself, and it's a pleasure to have you as a partner artist. But take it away. Tell us about you, your journey, where it started. As far back as when you realized you were creative, and all the way up to I guess today.
Thanks, man. Yeah, stoked to finally connect. Yeah, man, it's a long story. I feel like I'm still very much like in the middle of my journey, and every day is just kind of getting closer and closer to like what I'm searching for. But I've always been like the artistic person in the family, and I'll put that in air quotes because it wasn't exactly like it's like, oh, he's the creative one, he's the starving artist, he's gonna go to art school and then move back in with his parents. But I feel like I'm thankful that my parents kind of facilitated that a little bit. I think I started with photography at a very young age. I think I got my first camera, like, I don't know, there's photos of me taking photos around like the age of, I don't know, 5 or 6. I feel like that's pretty young. I used to always play with, my parents' digital cameras and video cameras. Ancient technology now. I mean, you can just do everything on the phone. But yeah, I feel like I started like many other people just with skate videos. In my teenage years, I started to play around with 3D software just when I was 14 years old. And I've just always been kind of intrigued and fascinated by the technology and then just creating things and making things, because I saw everyone just kind of working like all day, just jobs that they felt like they had to just to make money. And I was like, wait a second, like that doesn't seem fun at all. There's got to be something else. So yeah, I feel like after doing enough of that stuff and deciding that I wanted to pursue like an artistic career, yeah, I guess I kind of carved out a path for myself. I went to school at the Art Institute of Seattle, which is now closed, which is just kind of funny. I've never interviewed for a job in my life, so I don't really have to admit to anyone that I went to AI Seattle. But yeah, it was pretty brutal as far as like their placement rate. I think they were advertising at the time like 100% placement rate, but they were including Radio Shack. And there's a lot of people who spent $80K for a degree, went there, and then just they moved back in. So I do feel fortunate that 2 years into it, I was like, wow, I need to actually do something here, because no one's just gonna like teach me anything. So I did a lot of independent study. I was playing a lot around with cameras and 3D animation and visual effects. And when I was 21, I started my company Distinct with my business partner. At the time, he was the cinematographer and I was the kind of motion graphics 3D guy. And I learned a ton from him, and he learned from me as well. And I feel like we just kind of kicked off this whole media content creation. It used to be like advertising. You would do, a brand would need an expensive, TV commercial for like, a ton of money. And it was kind of shifting to where like, well, they want to spread that into like 20 different videos. So essentially we kind of filled the need of, just content creation. And fortunately that went really well. It's still going strong to this day. And my wife works at the company. My twin brother works at the company, a couple of my best friends. And so all that to say that, I carved out my path, kind of proved the haters wrong, that you can have a career and in art. And definitely just kind of grinding on the commercial art side of things for, you know, over a decade, and just kind of honing. Wow, it just got really bright in here.
It's all good. We can cut that in.
Yeah, just kind of living in the commercial art side of things for many years, just trying to, you know, make money, but also be able to do what I love to do. And I guess over time, you know, you just kind of get burnt out, and you're like, at the end of the day, you are like helping to sell widgets to customers and consumers. And you know, you can always find something to obsess about, like the technical, you know, render capabilities of all of the software and stuff. But yeah, I kind of just, I wanted something a little bit more. And I think that's my path, which led to NFTs. Like, you know, I would work back to back 14-hour days, like commercial art. And then in the evening, I would continue working on my own stuff and then post it to Instagram with no like intention of anyone like collecting it or buying it or making any money from that. That was an outlet for me. I just like creating, and it was almost always inspired by like a new tool I was learning, or just kind of like dailies like Beeple was doing, so to speak. And I feel like that kind of evolved once you could do NFTs like with Ethereum. All of a sudden it's like, hey, instead of, you know, trying to sell a $40 print on your website, you know, collectors are coming in, and they, you know, they might want to collect your work. So that's kind of how I got involved. You know, I started tokenizing some of my digital artwork and just trying to, you know, I came back to my Twitter after like a 6-year hiatus and just started to try and get involved in the conversation and start to learn, and just grinding it out, spending a lot of time. You know, when you come to Twitter and you have like 200 followers, it feels like you're just shouting into the void and just like, you know, buy my art, buy my art. You know, it's not a sexy lifestyle. Because, you know, as an artist, you want to be creating and focusing all your energy on like pursuing your passion, expressing yourself, you know, learning new things. But I feel like you also have to be like your own agent, like scheduling all these calls, emails, selling your artwork, managing, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like I kind of made some headway in the NFT space a bit. You know, started working my way up. It was kind of a slow grind. And then, you know, early last year, I finally got accepted to Super Rare, or invited to Super Rare. And I felt like that was kind of a big moment because, you know, being in the NFT space for 2 to 3 years, that was like, you know, a highly curated, known for having high sales, serious collectors. So it was almost like this affirmation or this validation that, you know, any artist might seek in their maybe early career, before you realize that the only validation you need is from yourself. And not from like collectors. And so yeah, that was kind of interesting timeline because you know, I sold a couple of pieces on Super Rare in January, and then Ordinals dropped in February, and I literally, without, I mean, I went all into Ordinals. You know, being so into Bitcoin for so many years, I didn't even really touch on that part of my history. It was just a no-brainer, and I focused all my energy and attention to Ordinals. I kind of just forgot about ETH and Super Rare, to be honest. But yeah, I feel like it's crazy how it's only been just about 12 months, and just I feel like I had my most productive, enriching year ever in 2023, and just growth as an artist. And I feel like just that interaction with the technology, you know, with the initial friction, kind of pushed me to kind of learn and explore concepts and ideas that I never would have. And that was also like early last year was when like AI tools were kind of hitting critical mass, and, you know, everyday average users could just kind of get involved. So using Chat GPT daily to just explain things to me, help me learn things quickly. Definitely helping a lot with code. You know, I used to code some ActionScript 3.0. I used to like make MySpace banners for people for like with like HTML, CSS. So my knowledge is pretty basic, and GPT like really filled in the gaps there and helped me like create what I wanted to create. And I think that's what it's about. Like we're all becoming less of the execution side and more of the like storytellers, visionaries. I feel like especially in my industry, like in my day job, like the creative industry, you know, there's going to be less of an emphasis on like, okay, who can do this work? Because, you know, we're going to have machines being able to do that. And it's going to be more about like, okay, who are the tastemakers who can like tell this story, you know, as a creative director type of role. So yeah, that kind of covers, yeah, I just rambled for a while, but that kind of covers, you know, kind of growing up and kind of how I got here. Yeah, the Bitcoin side, I feel like I was moonlighting on the Ethereum chain for a couple of years. I've always thought Ethereum would have value, but I didn't. I like ETH, but I love Bitcoin. Like it was always about Bitcoin. You know, the entire time in the NFT space, I was always bringing up Bitcoin on spaces, and I fully expected there to be NFTs on Bitcoin at some point. So yeah, when that technology, when Casey dropped the protocol, I was ready to jump on it and start inscribing my artwork. So
there's a lot to unpack there, a lot, which is great. You're an excellent storyteller. I think it's something that a lot of people would know if they've listened to you on Spaces or just gotten to know you through owning your art or just being in your server and whatnot. I'm going to rewind with you way back. You're not the first person in the space that, or one of our partners that has mentioned that their first dabble or their first, I guess, introduction to being a little bit creative was with a camera. And it's funny you said that, you know, you were 5 or 6. We're both parents. My 7-year-old is really into sort of taking photos and recording his voice and doing things. What do you think it was about that, or do you remember what you found inspiring about it that stage, and how do you think that sort of shaped your movement? You said you got into skate videos and then into your own branding agency business. How has that evolution, I guess, gotten you to now in the art that you're interested in creating?
yeah, no, that's a good question. I feel like I was first like enamored with the technology, being able to like capture something in real life and then kind of reflect back on it. It's almost like you're stealing or immortalizing a moment. And it's cool because now we can immortalize things actually on Bitcoin. But yeah, just that lensing and that perspective, and immediately I kind of understood that everyone kind of sees the world differently, and your lens is always going to be unique. And especially like in the commercial industry, it's like you can give 2 people a red camera and they're going to produce completely different results. You could tell them go shoot the same subject and you'll just get completely different results. So yeah, I feel like just the lensing and just how you look at the world and how you approach things, and how did that kind of extrapolate. Yeah, I feel like for me, it's been a lot of the kind of technology guiding things, like predominantly working as a 3D artist for decades. I was just really inspired by how powerful these render engines could, you know, render like realistic things. So that I went through phases of like how like super, you know, ultra real can I get this to look, and just really getting into the technology. But there's a danger there because like, you know, you don't get that like perspective where you step back and be like, you know, why am I creating this? What am I creating this for? You're just kind of like running with the tools and the technology, which can be cool too. But now I feel like that technology is more inspiring like direction, and just kind of knowing like where you want to go and where you want to take that technology.
Definitely. And striations, was that something that you built using AI or this 3D technology. So you've had a rich history in creating 3D art, which is very nuanced. I'll pull that up and you can tell us about it.
Yeah, so I feel like large 3D renders don't really play that well with Bitcoin. Some of the things that I've minted on Ethereum are like, 50 megabytes. You're not going to get that on Bitcoin. But this is kind of like a fusion between, a lot of people have asked me, if I did create this in Houdini or Cinema 4D, and no, I was using prompting with AI and using all kinds of outputs and then remixing them to create new outputs. And I just thought that was a really just fun, rewarding part of the process. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like we went through that phase of like Mid-Journey came out, and at first everyone, they were like terrified of it. It had a lot of criticism, and I think we're now at the phase where it's accepted and people, it's not as hated. It's just another digital tool, right? My entire life I've been using the most powerful digital tools, so I'm going to use everything at my disposal to kind of tell my story. But this one was fun. Essentially there was an artist call for the Bitcoin conference, and I wanted to put forth this collection that I was working on that is just kind of a reflection of me and my life and kind of what I'm going through. Like I'm mixing all of these different elements, like my transformation from a commercial artist to an independent artist, my transformation as like, a married person who had a ton of free time to like having to choose, okay, these 3 hours I'm going to, work on this thing today. But yeah, I feel like it was just the kind of fusion and amalgamation of all these things and just a new kind of chapter in my book. And I feel like there was a lot of that last year. Initially there was this kind of rush to get things on Bitcoin. And the same thing with Ordinal shards. I wanted to create something that Bitcoiners would want to collect. And I had to move fast. I wanted a 100-piece collection, and essentially, AI tools allowed me to create these collectible gems in a short period of time. Yeah, someone did ask me like, hey, did you make these in 3D? You're a 3D artist. And I was like, dude, this would have taken me like 6 months. So yeah, to get the first inscription, sub 10K, essentially inscription 8575, those tools allowed me to kind of create my vision. And it's not well known, but it's essentially the ether rocks of Bitcoin, collectible gems. As I started mining Bitcoin out of my shed 3.5 years ago, so I was kind of obsessed with this concept of Bitcoin mining. It's not even that profitable, but I like contributing to the network and throwing hash rate to a pool and earning Bitcoin outside of having to like on ramp to an exchange or something like that. So yeah, my idea was like, it's kind of crazy that after 15 years of existence, we're finally like finding or unearthing these digital artifacts. And I just thought it would be perfect to have actually like mining for these collectible gems. So that was kind of the premise for Ordinal shards. And I actually used ETH as a launch pad. As a new dad, I did not have much time, and I could not facilitate like 100 OTC deals in Discord, like waiting on people to send payments. I was just constantly like not in and out with the newborn. So I decided to use ETH as a launch pad, and then I inscribed first, did the sales through Ethereum, and then now there's only 13 left on Ethereum. Everyone burned and took custody on Bitcoin, which was the whole idea in the first place. And it was the first project to do that. I think Nolish was also doing that around inscription 20,000 plus. But yeah, I feel like there was a lot of like pushing up against the friction and me learning new things last year. Another thing I wanted to delve into was generative art. And I was able to actually use the 3D software I've been using for years to kind of create that. And that's what led me to cipherglyphs around inscription 500,000. So it made that sub 1 mil mark, but and this was actually the first generative collection to be on Magic Eden's launch pad. I thought it was so late. I was like, oh, 500K. It's no one's going to care about this. But this was, my first project using Ethereum as a launch pad was almost, sacrilegious, right? You used ETH to help launch a Bitcoin project. So this one I wanted to be a bit more hardcore Bitcoin. And just this concept of these cypherpunks using the blockchain to send these glyphs, to send this visual communication system, across the blockchain and inscribing, these simplistic shapes and patterns, essentially like, encoded artifacts that can be decoded to tell messages. This was a lot of fun. I used Houdini, which is predominantly, 3D software. And I wanted something that was simple yet intricate, which, is Bitcoin in a nutshell. Like I learn stuff every day, at its core, it's very simple. It's a blockchain stacking blocks, but then like you look at constructing transactions and it can get as complex. It can get as complex as you want it to. So this was 256 pieces. I wanted to do a little bit larger collection, and I chose 256 because that's the hashing algorithm that secures the blockchain, the SHA-256 algorithm. And essentially I just spent a lot of time kind of curating, and just kind of, I rendered out a ton and went through and curated some of my favorites, and those are the ones that I offered. I worked with Ordinals to inscribe these because, again, I wanted to help like support the Ord protocol. So I donated 50% of the primary sales to the Ord team. At the time, Raf was a student and he was not making any money. I just was like, hey, we could float Raf for like the next 12 months with just like this single donation. Also did some other things, like gave away 5 uncommons and some other rare sats, and just I really wanted that one to be just a little bit more Bitcoin ethos, Bitcoin centric. And that it's nice to see there's been some sales recently on secondary, and it's nice to see that project doing well and people kind of discovering some of these early generative projects. There was a narrative last year like there's no art on Bitcoin, and there's a ton of art on Bitcoin. It's just not like the top trending by volume on these big on these big marketplaces. So I think people will kind of discover them at their own time. But yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite projects I've done, because just like how fresh and unique and just different. It just feels very Bitcoin native, born out of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then you mentioned it being, very Bitcoin ethos and SHA-256, it seems like you think quite deeply about what you're doing. You don't just do it for the sake of it, although you have been quite prolific at the same time. How has that balance been?
What the balance of like
The balance of being, I guess, executing, but still being very intentional.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of time. I was like, ordinal shards to cipher glyphs, from inscription 8,000 to 500,000. There was a big gap where I could kind of think and plan my next move. But I don't force anything. Like, you should see my like work in progress folder. It's insane. There's hundreds of folders with just start and stops. Like, it really has to speak to me and feel like it's worth putting out there. It's like making a film. Like, it takes the same effort and energy to create a shitty film and to create like a masterpiece like Oppenheimer. It's like, if you're going to spend the effort, you got to, make sure, it's going to be worth it. So I feel like that's another thing. Like, I'll constantly be tinkering with things, learning new things, try a whole bunch of stuff. And I feel like you kind of have to go through like tons of bad ideas until you find something like, if I love this, maybe there's other people that are going to love it too, and go from there,
And how is that? You said you curated the Cypherglyphs project, but you want it to feel authentic and you have to love it. How does it feel when you're putting it out to the public for sale?
That one felt pretty good, just because I always try and put myself, like, I'm a Bitcoiner, so I'm like, would I want to collect this? And is this mint price reasonable? Would I pay this to collect this? And if it's a resounding hell yeah, then I feel pretty good about it. But you're always going to have pre-drop nerves. As an artist, you can be pretty sensitive. Like, if someone doesn't like it or says one bad thing, you can go into a tailspin and like lose your whole week. And that's just the kind of fragile state of, like, I don't know, putting care and love into something and putting it out there. But I've grown to like not care as much about the critics and just kind of trust my gut. And that one, I do remember there was like, I think the whitelist got botted, so it was this kind of weird like stutter step on the mint. And it wasn't until like Danny from On-Chain Monkey minted and posted about it and then Dingaling as well, it just kind of like took off from there and got minted out. But yeah, I feel like the cool thing about Bitcoin is it's like there really is no rush. It's going to be there forever. And Sam Spratt said this recently, like, you can't take back rushed work. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And I'm proud of what I've put on chain. And the cool thing is, like, no one can go rewrite history and like change your inscription numbers. They can't remove it from the blockchain. It's literally there forever. And if what we all expect to happen happens in 30 years, people could be pulling these up in a classroom. It's crazy. And I really do feel like the intersection with technology, Bitcoin, general AI, and some of these technologies, they're going to be looked back on as historic moments. Like, oh, that was the first the first art projects created with this technology. I think those are going to have a lot of merits, and that's kind of a huge change of pace to that first wave of critique. Like, anyone can type words into a computer. It's like, yeah, but that thing with the lens, like, everyone's going to communicate differently and type different words. So it's like just kind of a silly critique.
No, it's an interesting metaphor. And you mentioned about how you sort of explored the innovation and explored the tech. We'll have a look at bit blocks, and then we'll also have a look at meta blocks before we, look at the prints that you've put out on Gamma, and also then your piece on Sotheby's, which is amazing, and we will get to. So let's look at bit blocks first. This was very unique. Do you want to tell the story of where the idea came from, how it was executed, and also how did you feel seeing the community, or quite a large community, get quite excited about it? It took over Twitter. It must be a unique feeling as an artist.
Yeah, BitBlocks was a ton of fun. Really proud of that project as well. And once again, I wanted to put myself in uncomfortable territory and just kind of push something even more kind of hardcore, code driven, runs on chain. I wanted to do something kind of new in Ordinals where, anyone could show up and type in an inscription ID, and that seed would drive the artwork. And there really hasn't been any mints like that. I partnered with Ordinals Bot, and yeah, it was kind of unexpected. I was working on BitBlocks like in secret for like 3+ months, and then in Ordinals Bot, of course, they had a crazy busy year last year, but like around late November, early December, because we'd been going back and forth for a while. They're like, all right, we're ready. Let's do this. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Because you want to, when you have such a large collection, you have to spend a lot of time making sure there's no duds and like it can work at a large scale. And so I was manually trying different inscription IDs and then adjusting the code and then listening to that feedback loop. But I guess just kind of a general overall, each bit block is just 180 bytes. So practically, very affordable to inscribe at these current fee rates. I think they'd be probably like $3 to inscribe right now. And, the image that is produced in the browser, if you right click save as, it downloads as like a 1 megabyte file. So it's kind of a way to, hack around Bitcoin and get a really minuscule file, but also get a really large file. So I was kind of saying like, this is how you put high res art on Bitcoin. But yeah, the minting experience was awesome. I partook myself, and it was a blast just typing in inscriptions. There were 1.3 million different possible seeds, as that's how many images were on Bitcoin at the time. Obviously, I couldn't go through all those as a single human being before the launch. So there was this degree of like randomness and excitement. Of course, a lot of people went for like historic inscriptions, but the cool thing is like the seed inscription will always be on chain, and you can see, and it's crazy. Like some people on secondary are paying, for sub 100 inscriptions, bit blocks that, they're paying a ton of money. But yeah, we cut it off at around 10,000 orders, and there were, a couple thousand duplicates, which is pretty standard with those like inscribe on demand projects. So there ended up being around 6.5 thousand bit blocks and over 1,000 new users to Bitcoin in Ordinals. And I think there's around like 2.3 thousand unique holders, which is awesome. And I think just as a community, our Discord, I think there's like 3,000 unique holders of all my projects since last February, which is just insanity. But it was a really fun experience. I learned a ton. I really feel like I pushed myself a lot, not being like a native coder, like to get out of that discomfort, not just like have someone do it for me, but go like figure out how to do it myself and come up with something that when you reverse image search it on Google, you get more bit blocks. Like you don't get like Piet Mondrian or like, you know, another artist, which, and it's, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having work that looks similar or in the same style as another artist. But I thought it was cool that as simple as it is, you know, an array of rectangles, some stroked, some, you know, striped, that you can kind of curate a unique look and then extrapolate that across, you know, thousands of them, and then feel kind of cohesive as a collection. But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be doing any large size free mints ever again, but you got to try something at least once. And I feel like it was awesome. And, you know, I love seeing it when it pops up every once in a while on the top volume charts and people kind of appreciating it. I think it's a good entry point as well, just for people to kind of learn about like recursion and how you can, with just a couple lines of code referencing like a master JavaScript file, you can do a lot of damage on Ordinals.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the word recursion. You have another set called meta blocks where you used recursion in a completely different way. So you really have kind of pioneered a few really unique ideas. No one had done bit blocks or anything like it. And you've also pioneered this, I'll let you explain it, this concept that you completed using recursion with meta blocks as I pull it up.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, I was just kind of like pursuing things I was interested in and things that I wanted to learn more about. Meta blocks was kind of a way of pushing the boundaries of Bitcoin yet again. I kept hearing people say like, oh, the max file size is 400 kilobytes for a single inscription. Oh, the max you can do is 4 megabytes if you pay a miner $50,000 or $100,000 to like take over that block. Once recursion was built into the protocol, and it seemed pretty obvious. I was like, wait, you can inscribe 400 pieces and then stitch them together to make a giant inscription. So that's what I did here. Very much inspired by Bitcoin's mempool. If you go to mempool.space, it's very vibrant and purple and neon. And I've been staring at it for years now. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do something that was kind of inspired by the mempool. You can see there's a Satoshi symbol in the center there. But yeah, so I kind of got to working once again with AI to kind of figure out, you know, an elegant solution to essentially make the stitching back together seamless and kind of work on any device, any size. And it's cool because when you actually pull up the inscription, it loads each one as like as a pixel almost, and I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, the full artwork is I think around 6.2 megabytes, and then I offered these pieces essentially as a collection themselves. And another way you could look at it is like fractionalization. You know, like you basically, it's like working backwards. It's like you inscribe the pieces and then put them together. Whereas if you were going to fractionalize something, you would take the big piece and then break it into small pieces. I also found that just kind of pretty fascinating in itself, just kind of a background way to get a really large image on Bitcoin. And I remember that week, like it was very well received. And I feel like it just got a lot of people thinking and inspired a lot of people like, what else can we do? You know, what else can we do with recursion? This is a big unlock for doing large scale pieces. And it's really cool to see like some of my heroes like Thank You X using the same technique with his latest drop, Terrains. And it's really cool to see Ryan Koopman's doing the similar thing. He only required four slices, but that's all you need. no one needs a 16,000 by 16,000 pixel piece of artwork on Bitcoin. It was more of kind of like a statement to kind of show people like, hey, in case you did want a 256 megapixel artwork, you totally can. So yeah, people got to take that "you can't do this" out of their vocabulary. That's what people were telling me, as a kid. My parents definitely supported me, but it was also like, I come from a family of doctors, lawyers. My brother's a lawyer. My dad's a doctor. My mom's a nurse. Like the idea of like being an artist, it's like, oh, cool. A hobby as a job. Yeah. Good luck. Have fun staying poor. Right. So yeah, anyone tells me like I can't do something, I literally won't stop until we figure out a way to do it. Like I feel like I'm a eternal optimist and a bit maybe OCD when it comes to like overcoming like hurdles or challenges. But
No, it's a really good attitude, and I think it's pertinent advice without even asking for other artists and people in the space. Let's have a look at the piece that you did, which was curated in by Stephen Nobody, who is part of Inscribing Atlantis for the Amsterdam Blooms collection. We've been talking a lot about work that you've created, for yourself. It hasn't been like, your IRL job where I guess you're working with clients and they have certain expectations. This one is themed. So how did you go kind of finding that middle ground of creating something that felt authentic to you, but also working within, the constraints of a theme?
yeah, no, it was awesome to get a prompt to have like, kind of a theme, but also have the freedom to kind of do whatever you want to do. And, seeing all these projects back to back, I really have ran with the idea of like, your art, your rules, you can do whatever you want. Don't get pigeonholed into making the same piece of artwork for the rest of your life. Just because a big collector spent 10 ETH on this piece doesn't mean you have to keep making that piece for the rest of your life. So I'm going to try everything. Maybe down the road, like there's a certain, visual language that I will do more than others, but I'm very much in the, throwing pasta at the wall, seeing what sticks, scratching, following things that interest me. And I'm not going to like force it. I'm not going to like, I'm just going to keep pursuing those things for this piece, the Blooms collection, being showed in Amsterdam. There was this whole, that's where like the tulip mania was going on. So there were some really powerful undertones of, flowers and blooming. And for me, I've been obsessing over like pixel perfect renders for so long. I really wanted to get a bit more destructive on this one and a bit deconstructed. And I've kind of mirroring how like even in crypto, you have these like violent, aggressive cycles. We've seen the price violently go upwards recently, but I'll never forget. This is my third cycle. Just those negative 70% drawdowns are brutal, but you kind of get used to them over time. But that kind of mirrors the life cycle of plants and flowers. My wife and I, we moved out to Whidbey Island in Washington in 2021. And I just feel like I'm way closer to agriculture, vegetation. We try to do some gardening out here, ultimately failed, but you just kind of more in tune with like the earth and just watching things grow and die and come back stronger. So that was kind of like, I wanted to mirror that kind of deconstruction and just kind of chaoticness of something in its bloom phase. I was stoked to see this one get picked up when they finally. When did the auction go down? Like a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, a couple of months ago now. Yep.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I was done.
So tell me about, I guess, getting curated into a collection when you're applying for something. How does that feel as an artist, and how do you go about it?
Yeah.
How do you approach it?
Yeah, you're always nervous, right? Because you don't want to be left out. Of course, people don't know that you submitted, but it always feels good. Earlier I was talking about, validation. If there's a particular curator and like you don't get chosen, yeah, I probably would like temporarily feel like, oh man, that, bummed out. So obviously when you do get selected, you feel good. And but I feel like if you're creating and submitting your best work, it does not matter like if someone chooses it or not. Um, Especially with Ordinals, like being able to sell your own work on your own website. Um, with a lot of these APIs, like Ordinals Bot has an API, for example. Yeah, you don't need someone to say, "Hey, this is good enough to sell." You can find your own collectors and curate your own collectors. Um, but it always feels good. I'm not gonna lie. We're all human beings. Like, I don't think you can just make art in a vacuum. It's meant to be shared. And that was one thing, like back in the day, just sharing things on Instagram, just posting daily explorations, or when I was finished with a piece, was kind of a way of like putting it out there. If people engage with it, great. But I was already like on to the next one. You check back, you're like, oh wow, people really like that one. And you kind of get that feedback loop. You can't let it dictate too much what you do next. Because then we get into what I talked about, like making the same piece for the rest of your life. But it does kind of help, like if your intention is like, I need to sell this, a piece of art every month to pay my rent. Yeah, maybe you might act on some of that feedback, but I'm still very much in the like, try everything, have fun, just keep creating. I think I just like being in the flow state of creating stuff, and I'm not always in it. So that's why like there'll be days where I'm just like bogged down with client work, a bunch of like obligations with family stuff, and I'm just like itching to get to create. And then, today I had a day where I could just focus on this project I'm working on. And it's crazy when you just have even like 4 hours uninterrupted, how much work you can get done. I feel like I got like 3 days of work done in 4 hours today, just because of that focus and concentration, and just kind of had a mini breakthrough. I was banging my head against the wall on a couple of this P5 JS stuff.
That seems like a little bit of alpha. Let's get to that closer to the end. You mentioned a little while back Nullish and rare sats. Let's have a look. And by the way, big congratulations. There's bids on. I'm not sure if it's finished. You have a piece at Sotheby's, which is incredible. And you can talk about, the special sat that it's on. And then love to hear a little bit about, your sat hunting, and if you're still doing it, and how that journey has been. And feel free to kind of elaborate on your thoughts on special sats, and then, linking it to a piece of art like you have.
Yeah. Rare sats, I think, are one of the coolest things about the Ordinals protocol, because it doesn't have to do anything with inscriptions, but it can. And I feel like when they're combined, something magical happens. I started sat hunting by hand I was like a month late to it. I'll be honest. I was like a month late to it. I started in like March or April, taking 1 or 2 Bitcoin, sending it to Coinbase, withdrawing it, checking to see if there were any sats. You literally would paste the UTXOs into ordinals.com and like scroll through and see if you can identify, these rare sats. There were no APIs you could call to or automated systems. And I think that's what makes a lot of those sats special that were found during that. It just wasn't as easy to kind of pluck those out. But yeah, going from, again, like no sales, no followers a year and a half ago to like having a piece at Sotheby's is pretty big deal for me. I'm stoked. I literally didn't care if it sold, what it sold for. Just like I'm over the moon that, you know, I'm even involved in this curation. I have 3 sats in there actually. Since the early days, I started using DZ has this Sat Hunter bot, which is just incredible. It's very expensive, but if you have the Bitcoin, I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. You know, you're putting your capital to work. You're taking the risk, and you're kind of yeah. You have to have a high conviction in these digital diamonds. But yeah, this piece, Obsidian Zero, I combed through billions and billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin over, you know, 7 months, and finally found a black rare. I was just stoked. There's only 28 that have been found, and this was the second one to be inscribed on. I mean, you have to be crazy to inscribe on like a $30,000 sat. Like, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. I had no idea Sotheby's was even going to have rare sat auctions. Like I started this art project in December. And yeah, so it was just kind of an unexpected surprise to kind of get approached about that, because I was launching a project around it. I used this as a parent to inscribe 100 cursed children before the cutoff, and I wanted to test the protocol and use batch inscription, so it was all one transaction. But yeah, essentially, you know, we've seen all these icons for these rare sats for the blacks. For the black rare specifically, it's this kind of diamond shape, kind of clocked square, which actually, if you turn your head to the right, looks like the rune, looks like Casey's rune logo. But yeah, this was my 3D depiction of the black rare icon in a perpetual loop, as it will live on Bitcoin forever, and just mark that period of not only the Ord protocol, when you could still inscribe cursed, but I feel like I combined everything you could do, you know, inscribing like a WebP GIF on a rare sat using batch inscription with recursion, parent child. Yeah, I was pretty much using like every feature of the protocol, and that it was just kind of something that I wanted to do. And yeah, it's awesome to see it up there catching some bids at, you know, Sotheby's.
Yeah, it must be an incredible feeling. And again, yeah, really using the innovation and the tech. You must get very excited when they push new, you know, upgrades on GitHub and have a look at what you can do next. And
we're getting close, man. We're getting close. I feel like a few more updates, and I think, you know, I'm not going to say total ossification, but I think it's in a good place where, you know, we won't have to do major updates, and people can kind of get used to using what we got. But yeah, man, I feel like I'm a super nerd. Like I love Bitcoin's UTXO model. I've learned so much about just like transactions on Bitcoin. Like for years, I feel like I was just LARPing as a Bitcoin maxi. You know, you dollar cost average, you send one transaction for over an entire year or so. You know, it's like you actually don't know how Bitcoin works. And if I'm ever going to ask like technical questions about Bitcoin, I will never ask, like I will always ask someone in Ordinals. Like, you know, the people that we have that you can kind of turn to for technical know-how, like they're not Bitcoin maximalists. They're the Ordinals enjoyers. Like, but yeah, I feel like Ordinals has pushed me to really learn more about Bitcoin, understand Bitcoin even better, and has actually grown my conviction. And it's just fun to wake up and live in that circular economy. You you know, you're earning Bitcoin for your art. You're spending 4 times as much as you earn back into the ecosystem. No, it's all good, man. I dabble with everything. Like I'll collect, I'll trade, I'll flip, I'll sell, I'll buy. Like it's just fun to have things denominated in Bitcoin and then just kind of be active in the space. Like you don't have to ask for permission. You can just like been dealing with some banking stuff recently, and it's like 72 hours is a long time to wait for your own money that you know someone is. Yeah, it's just kind of I just love a system that everyone can just kind of get involved with, and you know there really is no friction. You can just get in next block if you pay the right fee, you know.
Absolutely. And then as we sort of start to finish off, you said, you know, all the way almost back at the start of our chat about, you know, there's no art on Bitcoin, and you're one of our partner artists at Gamma. You're in the first intake or the first cohort, so to speak. You've put out a couple of prints. Let's have a look at them. You can tell us about them. They're very different to each other. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you as a partner. We look forward to you dropping more work with us. But, you know, you put out the Bitcoin Summer 2023, which was very aptly themed, and then Entropy, which is quite different. Yeah, talk to us, you know, about that. You know, there's art on Bitcoin, and that's something that we're very passionate about, and what we, you know, push and do at Gamma.
Yeah, I remember when the prints came out, and yeah, I was just so stoked to promote it because, you know, it kind of again shattered some of those misconceptions about like it's not easy to collect art. People don't know where to go. So I posted this video of me just scrolling, clicking buy, and just like collecting 3 or 4 pieces of art like within a minute. So I remember the vibe, like Ordinal Summer, Bitcoin Summer. For my first print, it was an open edition of just this orange astronaut chilling in max relax mode, because I felt like we were still in a bear market, but like the Ordinals folks were winning hard. And, you know, a lot of people, it took them a while to accept that. You know, a lot of them have come around, but we are still in the state of, you know, people hosting spaces like, what are Ordinals? These are stupid. You know, while people were literally, you know, making a 10,000x on the first BRC20 token Ordi. So yeah, I kind of want to encapsulate kind of a more realistic, serious kind of photograph of something, you know, not so realistic, right? Like an astronaut. I like the juxtaposition of the astronaut lounging by the pool, because at the start of NFTs, there was a lot of astronaut art, and I wanted to kind of like poke at that. People at first, you know, the astronaut art was going crazy. Keyboard Monkey bought this piece made by Studio SJQ for like 130. I can't remember if it was 130K or 130 ETH, but I feel like the NFT world like burnt themselves out on astronauts. There were so many like clones, and people were just like, you put an astronaut on it like you would put a Pepe on it, and it would sell. So I kind of wanted to poke fun at that, like a new cycle, a new era. You know, this orange astronaut, he's back. He's going to the fucking moon by the pool. But yeah, I realized, you know, at some point I have to do, you know, something a bit more, you know, my speed. So Entropy, there were more of a limited edition of 50, and kind of playing with that same I love abstract art. Don't know if you can tell, but it's so I saw people inscribing GIFs, but they were really low resolution. So I was like, wait, how can GIFs are just like, you know, images played back. Video art is just, you know, 24 frames per second played back. So my thought was, okay, I could inscribe 4 or 5 images and then use code to string them together. So it'll be, as like the highest resolution possible, and then kind of serve the same purpose. And I played around with the speed and the loop, and but yeah, it was kind of this. I called it entropy, and a lot of my work, I like to explore like physical and the digital, striations. I feel like is in that ballpark of, it looks like physical sculpture. It's created with digital tools. And yeah, this just kind of like themes of degradation, and as we see these monetary systems kind of collapse, and these systems degrade and break down. And there were also just kind of undertones of like, I look at inscriptions as like really hard NFTs, and just kind of poking fun at that as well. Just when you put something on a file server, you just don't know in 10 years. And I feel like with Ordinals, you kind of do know in 10 years it will still be there.
Yeah, really well said. I remember somebody in the space said that Bitcoin was hard currency and now it's hard data. So I think that that's, really well put and kind of sums up what you were saying there. Billy, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think people are going to just love hearing all this and really a deep dive into what you've done, and, and why, and the how, and the thought process. Can you leave us with anything interesting? You mentioned that you had a little bit of a breakthrough, in the studio today. What can you leave us with?
Yeah, this year I want to do less projects, more thoughtful projects, and more collaborations. So I'm working with a relatively large artist that was predominantly on Ethereum. They have dropped one project, one piece on Ordinals, but right now, very much in the tinkering phase. I think I've found something special and really cool. Definitely, every project I want to take it to the next level, elevate, build on things, concepts, ideas. This one is definitely going to be like, you show up to a mint page, you bring your own Versat, and that sat number is going to be the unique seed that drives this generative art. So that's kind of like the base level. Don't want to reveal too much about the artist and like the look of the pieces, but it's definitely, I'm not gonna I need it to be right before I share anything, and definitely not in a rush. So it's a big year, man. We got the Halvening coming up. I got a couple other fun little projects, kind of like a flash airdrop that's kind of undisclosed. It'll be exciting to see how the Sotheby's auction ends up, and then I have those children that I'm gonna kind of offer up to people. Last year I inscribed a couple hundred cursed inscriptions before the cutoff, so yeah, we got some ammo. We got some things in the hopper. But yeah, ultimately I just want to keep making art, make the best shit I've ever made, and just kind of keep scratching that itch.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, Brett. Cheers, man.
All right. We are